Hello there, and happy to all of you. Happy day. It is September 12th, 2019. Welcome to Charles Chat. I am going to make an attempt today to redo the vlog from last Thursday. I guess there were some problems for most people in viewing it off my blog or social media where it gets posted. So I thought I would make another run at it today. So if you've got a chance to watch the vlog last week, this is going to be a pretty similar repeat to last Thursday, so you can go ahead and move on to your next activity for the day. I wanted to talk a little bit about podcasting today. I'm not somebody who does broadcast a podcast, but I do listen to podcasts, and I've only been doing it for a few months actually. Podcasting, I believe, started in 2004. It is 2019, so I'm only 15 years behind the trend of listening to podcasts. And I have really enjoyed listening to podcasts over the last, like I said, few months. I've got a number that I listen to. I'm trying to figure out which ones are my favorites and the best, and I can trim that list down. So I thought today I could spend a few minutes just telling you some of the podcasts I'm listening to and recommend them to you if you are interested in picking up a few new ones that to put to your schedule, or maybe begin your own podcasting listening. I listen to podcasts mainly to be edified, be encouraged, be informed. Podcasting typically are short, anywhere from 5 minutes. Sometimes there are a few that last an hour, but I enjoy them a lot. One of them, of course, is The Briefing by Al Mohler. Not one I listen to every day, but Al Mohler does a good job of taking recent events and in society, around the world, in our culture, and helping Christians understand them from a biblical perspective. He does a daily broadcast called The Briefing. I would encourage you to listen to that one. There's a secular podcast I've really had fun with called Stuff You Should Know. And this is a podcast that usually taking some kind of event or object or some person and giving you lots of information that you didn't know about them. For example, this morning I was listening to a podcast about how government breakdowns work and learned a little bit about deadlines and committees and history and why governments shut down and how we can prevent them, and that was pretty interesting. I even listened to one a few days ago on the history of the Ouija board and how that works and the history of it and why it is not demonic, and so that was kind of an interesting podcast. I've been listening recently to one called 5 Minutes in Church History. That is put out by Stephen Nichols, and it is, as advertised, a 5-minute blurb on a figure like Martin Luther or an event like the Great Awakening, sometimes even on the history of a certain Bible translation. Only 5 minutes long. You really enjoy it if you love church history or need to get a flavor of church history. Listening to a podcast called Ask Pastor John, which is a podcast with John Piper, where he takes a question and answers it, an answer that is submitted by his listeners. He usually takes about 10 minutes or so to answer one question, and not the kind of Q&A where you can get a lot of questions, but just one. There's another podcast I've been enjoying listening to called The Table Podcast. This is put out by a couple of men at Dallas Theological Seminary, one of them being Darrell Bock. And I have a little bit of an interest in this one only because Darrell Bock has a history here at Wichita Bible Church and being a speaker. And I've been trying to give his podcast a listen. They take cultural topics, much like Al Mohler does, but they usually have a table of our panelists that will talk through them together, and I find it pretty interesting. The podcast Truth in Love is put out by ACBC, and this is where they take counseling issues. Things like depression, suicide has been one. Counseling parents the other day. How to counsel and how to inform and instruct other Christians and non-Christians from a biblical perspective on the struggles of daily life. On Preaching Podcast is another one I really enjoy. This is by H.B. Charles Jr., and it is just all about preaching, wisdom, tips, how-tos, sometimes interviews. And then finally, another one that I'm listening to that I really enjoy is just the 9 Marks Podcast, where they sometimes will rebroadcast a panel discussion at a conference. Sometimes Jonathan Lehman and Mark Dever will get together and talk about, for example, the other day they talked about church history and why Christians ought to pay more attention to it. And I listen actually to a lot more podcasts than those, but those are the ones that kind of stand out as my favorites. So hope this was helpful, and we'll see you on the flippity flip.